We are going to talk postpartum core restoration for women who've had babies. We're going to go over 3 must-dos in your postpartum core recovery program. The major thing that you need to know is that just because you've had a baby, getting your core back does not mean tightening your pelvic floor back up. Yes, you may feel like there was damage, you might not have as good of control of the muscles, but postpartum core restoration does not equal Kegels and sit-ups. It is quite the opposite, and we're gonna go through the absolute essentials that you need to know, 3 of them, in order to help start restoring your core today. I'm Dr. Allison Felt. I own Body Motion Physical Therapy located in Edmonds, Washington and Poulsbo, Washington. And we here are experts in helping people recover after babies, helping them birth their babies, and helping them stay really great and healed through menopause. So we're gonna go through what it's gonna take to get that core back. The very first tip I need to teach you is that getting your core back does not mean Kegels and it does not mean sit-ups. So what does it mean? Well, you grew a baby for 9 to 10 months, right? Your abs, they stretched out. You either had this baby through your belly or you had it through your vagina, and you might feel stretched or torn or might have other issues. And so, naturally, a lot of people put this out there. A lot of postpartum trainers, a lot of even pelvic floor physical therapists put this out there that, okay, you just had all that happen. We need to start doing crunches, or we need to start doing core work. We need to start doing Kegels to get our pelvic floors back. And quite the opposite is true. The very first thing we need to do is to heal these tissues. So, what's a must do? A must do is to absolutely don't start with the strengthening. You need to start stimulating the tissue and healing the tissue. So a few ways that this can be is the very first thing you can do is start breathing. Using diaphragmatic breath to help deliver oxygen to the tissue and to start getting the range of motion back to the tissue. When our bellies are big and we are doing our core exercises during pregnancy, all of a sudden, when we lose the baby inside of us and the baby comes out and now it's on the other side, it is really important that we do help our core go back together, but the way in which we do so is also very equally important, and it's not just through strengthening. So the breathing is going to help the diaphragm train the very top of the core. The diaphragm connects to the pelvic floor, and when you inhale, the pelvic floor opens, and when you exhale, you get a natural recoil. So this type of breathing is very essential for helping the core heal and starting to help stimulate the muscles to start the recoil process. The other thing that the breathing is doing, and why it's absolutely a very essential part, as opposed to just doing Kegels and tightening of the abdominal wall, is because it's also helping move the organs. So it's getting and generating some visceral motility. Visceral motility means that when the organs are inside your body, like the colon and the uterus, they naturally ebb and flow away from the midline and then back to the midline. This is a technique from John Barral, who really coined visceral mobility as an absolute essential for human function and human living. And when we're pregnant, all those organs get shoved out to the side. And so starting to get normal visceral motility back is really helpful. And the way we can do that is by working with the breath. So the breath and using those nice belly breaths is helping generate some visceral motility, but then is also helping heal that diaphragm and the pelvic floor and starting to get more range of motion back in tissue that might have been torn. As far as the pelvic floor is concerned, you could have some perineal tearing. You'll absolutely have some micro tears throughout all 3 levels of the pelvic floor, just from generally overstretching and then recoiling after the baby comes out. But you might physically have some stitches there as well. And so you want to start generating the breath to helping open the tissue back up to get the range of motion. If we don't get the range of motion back and we just start tightening, our body naturally tightens around micro tears and scar tissue. And so the key to having that strong core and rebuilding the core postpartum is actually getting the range of motion first, healing the tissue first, and then we can start contraction programs that include relaxation. But if we just go into contracting and you're contracting around scar tissue and tension, you're not going to have a strong core because you're not going to be working within the full range of motion. You might be strong in just the upper part of the core, and then you get tight and you kind of end up holding, but you lack the range of motion. And when it comes to core strength and core stability, every time our foot hits the ground, we need the pelvic floor to relax. And then when the foot hits the ground, you get a ground reaction force, and there's a little contraction, elevation. Same thing with breathing. You inhale, you get a relaxation. Exhale, you get a contraction. It's a natural recoil, okay? So that dynamic movement needs to happen. If we don't heal these tissues and we just go back into core strengthening and forget about the full range of motion of the core, then we become more cement-like, and we don't get that full range because our body's now bound down around scar tissue. What this can look like is it can look like you develop incontinence. So you start peeing your pants, maybe with jump roping, maybe at the trampoline park, maybe at the fitness classes that you go to. This can look like pain. It can look like discomfort within the pelvis itself. So like you just don't feel comfortable. It can mean that penetration of any kind becomes very uncomfortable. Deeper thrusting can become uncomfortable with intercourse. It also means that maybe orgasms are not so good. It can also look like back pain, hip pain, just not having this full range of motion, and developing this during the postpartum experience means that it can lead to these other issues. If you are experiencing these other issues, it's a perfect time to follow up and find a pelvic expert physical therapist who it can help you heal from these issues themselves. And so one other thing I should mention here is that also heaviness, feeling like you have a heaviness or something is inside your vagina and you're just not sure what that feeling is, that can indicate a pelvic organ prolapse. And a lot of times people are like, oh, then I just need to strengthen more. And it's quite the opposite. If you keep strengthening, you're going to squeeze everything out. You got to make space for those organs. And by making space, then those symptoms can go away. These are just some important considerations. So the absolute must do. Number one is let's not just go into doing Kegels and tightening and strengthening, and let's not just go into bracing our abs. We have to work the other ranges of motion independently by themselves. And also, even when you start to develop more strength, and we're going for more strength and contraction, then we want to make sure that we can also go into the breathing and the phases of relaxation to support all that contracting that we're doing. Must do number 2 is getting our lower abdominals to fire. We do this through what is called a transverse abdominis activation, or a TVA or a TRA, transverse abdominis contraction. And that is where we get the lower abs to fire, and we want them to fire to help to start to bring our pelvises back together and to give us a little bit of stability and retraining of that muscle now that it's been stretched out for 9 to 10 months. So join me here and we'll do this together. Okay, so we're gonna go through this contraction together, and we are gonna activate our lower abdominals right here. So again, we have already gone through our breathing, so we have full range of motion of our diaphragm and of our pelvic floor at the bottom. So what that looked like, again, remember the inhale and exhale. So that was the breathing, and now we're on this transverse abdominis contraction. And so if I touch inside my hip bones, my 2 hip bones right here, so my belly button's right here, and I just go out towards those hip bones, what I want to feel is when I do this contraction, I imagine that I'm pulling the 2 hip bones together, and I feel a firming under my fingers. It's not a pushing out under my fingers. It is just a firming, an inward firming. You can also imagine that if your pubic bone is right here and your belly button is right here, you're trying to elevate and bring your pubic bone up to your belly button. Okay, so you're here and you're doing that contraction. You can hold for 10 seconds. And then after that 10 seconds, you are breathing the whole time, so you're not holding your breath. After that 10 seconds, you let it go. So again, there's not much to see here when I contract, and now I relax. There's just not much movement, and you can't really see it. And so if you can see it, and you're really like bearing down and kind of pushing, and maybe you're flattening your back, that's not doing the transverse abdominis contraction that we want, okay? So that is the key, is to get that activation. I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply here, is if you can get this activation without squeezing your pelvic floor, or once you get this activation, see if you can relax your pelvic floor. A lot of people have overactive pelvic floors and they use their pelvic floor to get this activation. You want to be able to get this activation alone by itself without utilizing the pelvic floor, especially if you're having any discomfort in your pelvic floor or in your vagina itself. So really important, get this activation first and relax the pelvic floor. See if you can keep the pelvic floor relaxed as you get that activation. All right, so then after I do maybe 10 sets of 10 seconds, I'll take some nice deep breaths and make sure that I relax everything that I was just tightening. All right, tip number 3, as far as core restoration is concerned, is we went through the relaxation. Now we went through the lower abdominal contraction. And now when we're talking about fully rebuilding our cores, we want that lower transverse activation. We have full range of motion of our pelvic floor, so we shouldn't have to think about the pelvic floor motion. We should drive most of the motion through getting our glutes to fire. And so when we start to get our butts to fire, that is the last piece of the core, or really another tip of postpartum core restoration, is building your butt back. A lot of moms have flat butts because they lose their hip extension during pregnancy, fully normal, but we want to work to get that hip extension back so our glutes are active and our legs can work for us behind our bodies. You use that motion every single day in walking. And even when you like bend forward to pick your kids up, you want your butt to be doing the work, and that's going to help save your pelvic floor. So full body core restoration is getting full range of motion of pelvic floor, getting activation of the lower transverse abdominal muscles, getting glute activation, and last but not least, having your lower traps, which are these muscles back here, your lower traps and your lats connect down to your glutes. So this one connects down to here, this one, if I'm here, connects down to here. So imagine like you're kind of putting this shoulder blade in that back pocket and this shoulder blade in that back pocket. And so you get the whole backside coordinated and strong, and you get the front side coordinated and strong, all while having range of motion of your pelvic floor and your diaphragm. That is the goal of any postpartum core restoration, and really for having a good healthy skeleton support as we age. Okay, so really the biggest focus here, develop your glutes, make sure you have lower abdominal contractions, and make sure your shoulder blades and your lats and lower traps are keeping you here instead of up here. A lot of us do a lot of forward movement, a lot of baby holding after postpartum or during postpartum through toddlerhood, right? So maybe they're 4 or 5 and we use our necks for that, right? Or we set them on a hip. Well, that means that we just can't be in full good alignment and our muscles and our core can't work for us. But when I'm standing or sitting, I should feel like I can be fully relaxed, but yet supported. So part of that core restoration postpartum is get everything that we just talked about and strengthen those muscles and use those muscles during routines, whether that's bar 3, whether that's Orange Theory, whether that's your own workout programs, whether that's your Peloton programs, right? It doesn't matter what the programs are. It's that those are the muscles that we're working and supporting as we train whatever we like to do. You don't like to work out, just use those muscles when you're walking, use those muscles when you're unloading the dishwasher, and really start to integrate that all together so that you are using your core and it's supporting you during those kind of movements and for the rest of your life. So that is postpartum core restoration. Those are all the pieces of the puzzles that you need to be able to start to work and train through, and some absolute must-dos. If you're sitting here thinking, well, why didn't you tell us about Kegels, or we never got to Kegels? It's because honestly, Kegels are irrelevant. You never really need to train them, okay? As long as your pelvic floor has the range of motion, everything you do in your training routines, from glute training to, you know, going to your fitness classes, is gonna be activating your pelvic floor. The biggest thing is that you get the relaxation so you can activate your pelvic floor. And once you start to, you know, really work on these fitness routines, you want to drive the movement through your glutes and through your butt. So when people talk about driving the movement through their vaginas or through their pelvic floors or through their anuses, that's going to create more dysfunction. We want to drive all of the movement through the glutes, which is a very different sensation and movement pattern than driving from the pelvic floor. So I'm on a little bit of a tangent here, but I hope that clears up exactly what the postpartum core restoration is, okay? And when we talk about, like, maybe you're thinking about buying some online program, really you want to make sure that it hits every single one of these pieces here that we discussed today. So please like and follow and share. Drop us a comment on how many weeks your baby is and where you're at in your postpartum journey. My youngest is 2, and I very much still am postpartum. And so I am on this journey of, you know, restoring my core, getting things to function and support my body properly. It was my 3rd kid, and so the 3rd takes a toll. And really all babies take a toll, right? I've had to heal after all of them, but now that I know that I'm done, I'm even more invested in building back my core. So you can check out my book, Restore Your Body After Kids, The Secret to Avoid Peeing Your Pants and Achy Joints as You Age, or reach out. We would love to talk with you further, and let us know if you have any questions. Take care.